Welcome back. Welcome, welcome, gorgeous, gorgeous people. It is an absolute pleasure. You know, when you see you're like a celebrity that you love and you've been watching for a very long time, this is how I'm feeling right now. As I said before, Jane Hardwicke Collins, an amazing woman who I've been watching on social media for a while. I've been reading her wonderful newsletters that I get around the moon and the encouragement of tuning into a larger cycle outside of ourselves. And so it's a real honor to be sitting here with you, Jane. Thank you so much for joining me on Project Woman TV.
Thank you, Abby.
I asked Jane how she would like me to introduce her, but I'm going to let Jane do that because she's going to do it way better than what I can. So, Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Abby. And thank you so much for inviting me here. I feel very honored and grateful to be able to talk and share my perspective and my stuff. So, to introduce myself, I am a nearly 66-year-old postmenopausal grandma. So, I choose very carefully which words I say first in my introduction by order of importance. Postmenopausal grandma. And I was a home birth midwife for 30 years. So I was working in that area, which is at the coalface, so to speak, at the front line, working with women who are taking responsibility for their experiences of birthing, and then also with that branching into all the other connected things, all the other rites of passage. So basically, my story started as a 25-year-old. I wanted to have a baby and I wanted to learn as much as I could. So I went and studied midwifery. I was already a registered nurse here in Australia and having some hardcore jobs in children's and neonatal intensive care and also in operating theatres as a theatre sister, we called it back then. This is a long time ago. And then I did my midwifery training. And actually what happened, Abby, was that I woke up. And I woke up, I had like an awakening during my midwifery training where I saw, and I say this very often, I saw institutionalized acts of abuse and violence being done on mothers and babies masquerading as safety. And, you know, like it's only just gotten worse over the decades, and it's a very sad situation. So basically, my how did I get to here and what my pathway was that I left the system as soon as I could and became a home birth midwife. And I pretty much grew up in that world from like 26 until I stopped attending births at about 56. And I also had a side thing going on, which was my love and exploration of shamanism. So doing all the different shamanic practices with a teacher and learning all about those sorts of things. And I also met my beloved teacher whose work I carry the lineage of. So this is Janine Pavati Baker, and she's dead now. She died in 2005. And it was my deathbed promise to her. She was in America. I went to visit her at her deathbed, and I promised to her that I would continue her work. So that's what I have been doing and are doing with the School of Shamanic Womancraft, which is an international women's mystery school. So basically, my work is really the enactment of my mission. And my mission is, I say it in all the different ways, but to help people awaken from the patriarchal slumber spell that we are under. We are asleep to our power. This specifically women, you know, like all of our powerful moments in our lives, our rites of passage are pretty much medically managed. And this sort of culminates at menopause and then death. And everything's medicated and we're groomed for this, you know, with these attitudes to our body. So my mission, having had the experience myself and helping many others, is to wake up the witches. So I like to introduce myself as a grandma warrior witch midwife. So I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but just understand that witch means wise woman. And if that makes you cringe, then that's an example of you holding what's called these days the witch wound, which is fundamentally a fear of our power, because actually not that long ago, maybe 6 or 7 generations in most people who are of European descent, 6 or 7 generations ago, the witch hunt was still happening. So it was like actually dangerous to be a woman. It was likely that you would be framed and hung or burned or drowned or whatever. So we're still in this modern time in recovery from that, as well as the fact that we live in a patriarchal culture whose mission is to maintain the oppression of women and the suppression of feminine wisdom, knowledge, and power. So that was more than an introduction, but there you go.
I feel like that's the end of the conversation. That's done. We've sold it. What an intro. It's amazing. And this is what drew me or draws me so deeply to you, Jane, that that remembering, making women remember what we've forgotten or what we, I suppose in a way was taken away from us, and awakening that. That's what burns inside of me. And the word witch, I mean, I think it's a really powerful word. It's such a powerful word.
Mm.
My big question to you was in regards to communication within female health. Now you've got a long history. I feel like I've just dipped my toe in with the last 7 years I've been in this. Where do we need to focus most within the communication towards female health? Is it the patriarchy and the imprint of that? Is it actually the women? Is it men? Is it where does this conversation need tending to most? Because from what I currently see, and again, it is all perspective, it's actually the women that need almost an unwrapping of the conditioning that they believe to be true. So,
Mm.
yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. Like nothing's going to change unless the women say that's enough.
Yeah.
Like we saw all that. We've seen all that with the Me Too movement, like when the women all stood up and said, this is what's happened to me and that's not okay, and all of that en masse, then people listened. So sadly, in our culture today, it has to be more than one or two women to get any attention about what's going on. So we know from the birth world as well that the only way any of this is going to change is when the women stop showing up to the places and ways that they're cared for in the system and in the institutions. That if women just keep showing up to the doctor, keep showing up to all the same old things, same old contraception, same old birth care, same old menstrual cycle management, and then it culminates in menopause. So basically, women need to wake up, as I said, and actually, as you said, great idea, to unwrap us from our conditioning. So we've been conditioned. So I think that that's the thing. The communication around women's health is just the maintenance of the conditioning that we've been under and kept under to hold ourselves in a place where we don't realize our power and therefore can't use it, And so the clue is that anything to do with the feminine or women that's put down, made a joke of, feared, or invisibilized is a clue that it holds great power. And so I mentioned earlier in my long introduction that this idea of medically managing our, excuse me, our rites of passage has been has had such an effect on us to think that we can't trust our bodies. They're unpredictable, they do dangerous things, and we need rescuing. So the communication that women get all the time are things like, we're broken, we're powerless, we come second, we're too much, we're too fat, we're too loud, we're too quiet, all those sorts of things that are really such a reinforcement of the holding of us in a powerless situation. Now, I'm I'm speaking generally, and there are lots of women who have already woken up and who are making very different choices around contraception, around how they embrace their menstrual cycle, how they make their choices around where and with whom they'll give birth. And now we've got this huge conversation going on social media and in the media about menopause for the first time. So first thing that needs to happen is that women need to wake up and what we're saying and realize how conditioned they are. And then they can, what do you say, see the wood for the trees. They can understand why we have this perspective of ourselves. It's the conditioning of a patriarchal culture. It's really very simple. I've written a little booklet. I called it Her Story as opposed to His Story or History. And it goes through the effects of the patriarchy on women and the feminine. And, you know, like it's not just women who are suffering here, who are experiencing the effects of the oppression within a patriarchy. It's also the men, you know, because the feminine way is so I think people get mixed up about what masculine and feminine is and men and women and all that kind of stuff. So I'd like to refer to the Eastern traditions who use yin and yang with great respect for that culture. And I'm not trying to use it in any other way than to explain that there are masculine qualities and there are feminine qualities, and we all have all of them. So it's not just women who are getting the short end of the stick, or however we say that, in this whole patriarchal culture. In fact, the only cultures that have survived the patriarchy have also sacrificed their men. So nobody is getting out of this very well. So the idea being that the men were sacrificed either to war, you know, you've got to fight for your country, or to working for the man, you know, for the system. So not a lot of freedom and a lot of, you know, you go this way in your life. So we firstly need to listen to what the women say in reaction, because that's the thing that doesn't get a good enough voice, is how women feel and what arises for them, us, when we realize this conditioning. You know, like most women have no understanding of how women's health is managed. It's pathetic. You know, like drugs were not even tested on women until recently because they were too unpredictable to be tested. And other things like that is that everything is made in our culture is made for men, including car seats and air conditioning regulators in office buildings. So women are, you know, constantly getting the message that we're different and therefore less than, and not, you know, not the same as men. And that's obviously true. You know, this whole equality situation that we're fighting for all the time, how that's ended up recently is that women are equal to men so long as they can do what men do. You know, like that's not equality, because we're not the same as men. We're actually extremely different. You know, we share things anatomically and physiologically and mentally and all the things, but we have a very, very different body and a very, very different life to a man. And that's not taken into consideration. In fact, it's all hidden and medicalized and pathologized. So our lives have been pathologized. So when we need to listen to the women's voices, we need to help them realize they've been tricked. And, you know, a lot of women, when they awaken to that, and sadly, a lot of women awaken to this at menopause. And when women awaken to this, especially at menopause, they wake up and they are rageful. You know, the woman who realizes at menopause that, oh my God, the menstrual cycle had a purpose. Why didn't anybody ever tell me that? Why have I been putting things in my womb or in my mouth to turn it off when, oh my God, it's a transformational process every menstrual cycle, and I've missed out on that. And here I am waking up at menopause and like, you know, fuck you, patriarchy, you've ripped me off. So we then need to tend to those women, you know, because waking up in rage is a painful process. So there's lots of healing that needs to happen and revisiting their previous rites of passage and their menstrual cycle, their childbirth experiences, if they've had babies and they're waking up at menopause, and just to help everybody see all these rites of passage that we go through as women in context, like they're not random dangerous events. They are transformational rites of passage that take us through our lives. There's adolescence, then there's matrescence. So have you heard of matrescence? It's like the becoming a mother, like in
Oh, wow.
adolescence. Yeah. So adolescence is the becoming an adult, right? It takes a while. And then this concept of matrescence, which was developed by a woman, I can't remember her name, I'm really sorry, in the 1970s. And it's taken a long time to catch on, but it's catching on and giving a lot of mothers a sense of relief. Oh, phew, I didn't feel this. Oh, I'm a mother. When the baby came out, I have some time to become a mother in the same way that we had time to become an adult. And now the next essence, so adolescence, matrescence, and now I've renamed perimenopause and menopause to be sagessence, the becoming of the wise woman. Yeah, so we want to use these terms rather than the medical terms, because we're familiar with adolescence, we're becoming familiar with matrescence, and if we embrace sagessence at menopause, then we have the time and space and the awareness that it's a process, and it's a long process. Actually, it can take 10 years to become the wise woman, and then it's like you got to maintain to be her. It's not just something that you become. It's a process of a lot of healing and a lot of stepping up into a next level responsibility as a postmenopausal woman. So we need to listen. We need to help women wake up. We need to listen to them, because, like the biggest complaint I ever hear from women across all life stages is, I don't feel heard, And so, the solution for that, the wound reveals the cure, which is the mandate of the goddess Hygeia, who's the goddess of health and healing. The wound reveals the cure. So when women don't feel heard, like, duh, we need to listen. And we're not listening, like you have like I don't know how long a doctor's visit is, 15 minutes to talk about menopause or something and get the prescription. Medicine is trained to prescribe fixes to symptoms, not go to the root cause. So not going to the root cause has been one of the biggest problems in all Western medical situations, and especially women's health. It's tragic. Like there are people on Earth now planning to go to Mars, right? And they're just starting to figure out what the fuck endometriosis is. Like it's women are at the bottom of the barrel. Like and this is all part of the realization. I know I'm answering this in a long way, but I just want to say something about what we saw in COVID here in Australia. And I think it was pretty much the same in all the other Western countries, that 10 people could go to a funeral, 5 people could go to a wedding, and 0 to 1 could go to a birth. So women were left on their own mostly, or had one person to be with them during their birth. And, like if you think
That
that's
breaks my
adequate.
heart, Jane.
Yeah, exactly. So bottom of the barrel, women got that message. You don't matter. It should have been however many people a woman needs at birth to help her. That's the most important thing. So we need to listen to women basically grieving and debriefing and coming somewhere where they can feel where they belong and that they're valued. And then, we need to help the men. They've been conditioned in a patriarchy just as much as we have. And so many of us, including men, have unconscious biases around the feminine, Like you can't not, we can't not. Like, depending on your age, your parents and your grandparents, if you look at their perspectives on life, we've come a long way, but not far enough. And that's why I believe there's so much rebellion as such that happens in the next generations. It's like, the boomers are getting so much shit these days, and fair enough, you know, and it's the Gen X that are bringing particularly menopause to the front of everybody's who's looking screens, etc., to be able to say this is not good enough. But sadly, I feel like that's going down to this is not good enough because women suffer. You know, there's so much about reinforcing we suffer so much. And I'm not trying to say some women don't suffer, but you know, you don't have to hunt too far into the philosophies and psychologies of traditional cultures and smart people to know that pain is a given in life. There's going to be pain for this, pain for that, but suffering is the story your mind is telling you about the pain. So, you know, we already know the effect that that can have on with childbirth when women embrace the pain of labor as opposed to try to get away from it and be numbed by it. Like it has a whole nother level of magic and mammalian purpose. Duh. So, same with all the things, we need to be unraveling the medical approach to it. So we need to help men see their unconscious bias. Medicine has to go through an overhaul because, like, you know, that doctors who so there was a survey here in Australia with general practitioners, and 7% of them said that they felt able to help women with menopause. Like they don't get enough training. And obstetricians in their training, many of them never even see a natural normal birth. So their perspective is so, like, you know, risk focused. And then come birth trauma, like women who experience birth trauma. And here in Australia, that's 1 in 3 women experience birth trauma. And 1 in 10 of those 1 in 3 experience PTSD from their birth trauma. And 70% of the cause of birth trauma, the 70%, the most, is what they say is called iatrogenic, which means it's caused by the doctors and the midwives who are delivering the care. So, you know, that's terrible news, but it's also good news because we can change that. Those people just need to be more aware of the effect they're having and do their own inner work so they're not being cranky, scared people serving women in their most vulnerable place when they're so imprintable by what they say and how they say it. So we need to upgrade the services and the culture. And, like, you know, there's much revolution happening within women's health, but from a minority, a loud and noisy minority. But, you know, maybe it'll just do what it usually does, which just splits. And we see, you know, these are the women who do this and these are the women who do that. And, you know, fair enough. One of my main positions with all of this is to trust everybody's decisions that they make. Everybody is on their path. What would they be on if they were not on their path? You know, they may get more information and change the direction that they're on. And that, I feel, is the responsibility of people like me and you who can share information to help people kind of update or upgrade their knowledge so that they can be aware of, you know, what happens and why and all of that. So the communication around women's health is coming from so many different directions. And as a first aid situation, we need to help the women, and then we just need to upgrade everybody else. But as I said, nothing will change unless the women say enough.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much in that. We need another 4 hours, please, Jay. It's nearly bedtime for me. Me and Jenna in our pajamas. Could you have guessed? It is. And to remember, I still have the beautiful called M powder that's based in the UK. And I was working with them on their trial to support these women and just sitting with them. It was that rage. They understood all of a sudden that they were saying goodbye to a part of themselves they'd never said hello to. That is so big, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, I missed
that,
the
like you
beginning
said
of what
earlier,
you said. I missed the beginning of what you said. You're working with women.
I was working with women going through menopause, in menopause, with this wonderful company, Empowder, and this rage and this grief that you speak of. When we opened it up, we saw that they was angry because they were saying goodbye to a part of themselves that they hadn't said hello to. They didn't even know
Mm,
them, and they're waving them goodbye. It's like, ah, that is so deep. That is so powerful. And of course, you're going to feel angry about it.
mm,
Absolutely. But the conversation that we see so much, well, being in the UK, I'm focusing in the UK, is that straight away we go to medicalisation. And I was listening to a radio station yesterday about perimenopause. And I was like, great, this is awesome. We're talking about perimenopause on the radio. Yes. And they brought this woman on who was really going through it. It was all, she was having an awful time. The first question the specialist asked was, are you on HRT? That was the first question. It really fires me up, because surely the first question should be, being you, how do you feel about being a woman? What support do you have? You know, who's there for you? Where are all these questions about love and lifestyle first before we even step into that zone of medical treatment? So I get,
mm,
my question now is moving on to the conversation of, what do you see of what the conversation around medicalisation for women? What is this conversation? Where do we need to go?
mm. Well, there is an amazing thing happening right now here in Australia. There is a Senate inquiry, so that's the government, into menopause. A Senate inquiry into menopause. What is menopause? And they have their terms of reference, you know, what they're going to figure out. And number one is the cost.
Yeah.
The cost of lost work, lost superannuation, the cost of medical help, blah, 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 blah. So that's fucked. That's the most important thing. So, like, I hear you. This is ridiculous because our whole life process has been medicalized, you know, like um, we are groomed to have this perspective. Like the first thing that happens on this journey to, you know, that sad waking up at menopause of where have I been all my life? I didn't know I had a body that I needed to pay attention to. I thought I was just a sexual object, you know. You could get that impression from the media about being a woman. And depending on your family and what your mother was like and your grandmother and all of that. But the menstrual cycle is the initiation of our menstrual cycle at our menarche when we are however old, average age 13. That's a rite of passage into womanhood. And a rite of passage, we have lots of rites of passage, you know, there's the physical ones that are often called the women's mysteries or the blood mysteries. And then we have kind of external cultural ones like, you know, graduation, getting your driver's license, getting married, all those sorts of things. But the physical transformational rites of passage that we go through have all been medicalized. So menarche, not so much medicalized, although a lot of girls who don't get their period till, you know, late, not that there's ever late, there's just on time, investigated, which would be like the most ghastly way to be initiated into womanhood, to have yourself checked as to whether you're capable or able. And then the menstrual cycle, actually what we are initiated into with our menarche is menstrual shame. So this is where it all starts, at menstrual shame, because our experience of menarche is pretty much whatever our mother experienced at menarche, unless she has woken up, excuse me, and has thought, I am not going to have that my daughter, or, you know, for boys too, my son, go through an unconscious rite of passage. I want better for my daughter than what happened for me. So these mothers have woken up, and then they need to do their own inner healing of their menstrual shame, so they're not unconsciously passing it on to their daughters. But, you know, that's happening in about that much of the population. And so menstrual shame is leads to birth shame, leads to menopause shame. You know, menstrual shame leads to body shame. And body shame leads to low self-esteem, and low self-esteem leads to all manner of wounded behaviors, such as self-harm, eating disorders, and so sadly, in teenagers, and probably older women too, risky and dangerous sexual decision-making. So way back, we're encouraged to reject our menstrual cycle. And our menstrual cycle is, to quote Alexandra Pope, the barometer of our well-being. There's a book written by a doctor called The Menstrual Cycle, the Fifth Vital Sign. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has recognized that the menstrual cycle is the fifth vital sign. So it's an indicator of a woman's state of wellness and health. Yet we're encouraged to reject it. And if we reject our menstrual cycle, we reject our body. We reject our body, you know, what are we? Just a head. And if we don't, if we don't value our body, then, you know, it doesn't really matter what happens to it. So the menstrual cycle is our compass. And it's a stress sensitive system. So it tells you what's going on in your life and what needs to change if you pay attention to it. But we're encouraged to, well, you know, often just switch it off or control it with contraception. And so many women get put on the oral contraceptive pill, the pill. It's so famous, it's called the pill. And there's some very sad things that happen with that medication. And most women have no idea what the side effects are, which can be death, actually. But one of the saddest things, like that's rare, but you know, like if you don't need something and one of the side effects is like really very bad, then you've got to pay attention to it. But who reads the side effects? Who gets told the side effects when they're prescribed these medications? But the sad thing, I think, is that when women are on the pill, they are in this sort of pseudo space where their body kind of thinks they're pregnant and they're just not ovulating because of that. And when women are on the pill, and if they're heterosexual, which presumably is why they're on the pill, they are attracted to a different kind of man than they would be attracted to if they were not on the pill, which is so sad. And women meet their, you know, they meet their mate, they're on the pill, they meet their mate, they go off the pill, and they're like, oh my God, you don't smell right. You're not right. And when I say smell, I'm talking about pheromones, you know, the hormones that move through the air. Like we're just like dogs, we sniff each other's bums, but we're a little bit more subtle with it, but we can smell who's right and who's wrong. Because when you're not on the pill, you are attracted to a very different kind of man whose genetic material is as different to yours as possible, which is the opposite when you're on the pill. So, you know, like that should be a warning. Don't make babies with the person that you're attracted to when you're on the pill, because it probably won't last. Wow. Which is very sad. So there's that. And then, you know, this new kind of, well, it's not new, but why do you need a period? You don't need a period. You're going to get too anemic. You don't have to be inconvenienced, blah, blah, blah. And there was a medication created to suppress the menstrual cycle. And its tagline was, feel the same every day. And, you know, like we don't feel the same every day when we're on a menstrual cycle. We don't feel the same every day anyway, either, because we are under the influence of so many cycles. And if it's not our menstrual cycle, whoever doesn't have a menstrual cycle for whatever reason, pre-puberty, male, any other reason, pregnant, breastfeeding, and your period hasn't come back yet, perimenopause, you don't know where you are, postmenopause, you have no longer got your menstrual cycle, then the cycle, we still go through a cycle, and it's the lunar cycle, because the lunar cycle is the blueprint for the menstrual cycle, which is a whole nother story. But that's the way to help menopausal women who like, what happened? I missed out, that they can then connect with the lunar cycle. And, you know, if that sounds a bit too weird and witchy, then you need to do the reading to understand that everything on the planet is affected by the moon. You can't not be affected by the moon. In fact, over 700 species on the planet organize their fertility and reproductive cycle around the moon. and as did human women before electricity. So, you know, the science as king and medicine as the, I don't know, Pope. I don't know. That's probably the wrong thing to say, but you know, these boss guys, these boss guys are not open to any of this. So we're groomed at the menstrual cycle to not embrace it. And but if we do, like when women embrace their menstrual cycle, it's like there's this transformational opportunities every cycle to basically let go of everything that no longer serves you and then call in what you need for your healing each cycle. And women who work with that cycle, they have the opportunity to do inner work, their healing of their childhood traumas, their reclamation of their body, their healing of their red thread, their motherline trauma, the healing of the collective pain body of women. You know, the menstrual cycle is a way for women to connect to their bodies, to each other, and to the earth and the moon. Like it sounds fanciful, but it's true. And you know, it's lovely. So then you write, you know, I believe the menstrual cycle is great preparation for childbirth. Because if we can tune into our bodies through our menstrual cycle, particularly when we're bleeding, and go inward and listen to our body and especially our womb, we will be guided to do and find and be however we need to do and be for our well-being. But, you know, people just use tampons and take medication and carry on business as usual and avoid and miss out on that communication with your body, which, as I'm saying, is preparation for childbirth. Because if women are aware of their body as their ally, you know, like it's not a enemy, and our hormones are not our enemies. This is our allies. It's such a great way to control women, to have them think that their bodies are their enemies. Like nothing could be further from the truth, actually. We're miracle workers, actually. You know, like we don't have to think about growing a baby in our womb. We don't have to think about how to get it out. Our bodies know how to do that. And so childbirth gets medicated out of fear of pain and fear of risk and danger and blah, blah, blah. And then it's just obvious that you would then medicate menopause so that you could reduce your suffering and just cruise. Now, you know, when you're on HRT, which has been rebranded to be called MHT, which means menopause hormone therapy, not hormone replacement therapy, because you can have hormone replacement therapy for other things, right? But this is menopause hormone therapy. It's the same thing or similar to the pill, where you have an extra dose of the hormones, either estrogen or progesterone, or sometimes testosterone, or sometimes all these other things. So it keeps you this side of menopause. You don't actually go through the process where the hormone levels return. Actually, this is amazing. The hormone levels return to what they were pretty much pre-puberty. So we have this experience between puberty, like menarche, and menopause, but not just the last period. It keeps happening. You know, I think it's like 5 or more years after your last period, your body is still adjusting to the lowering levels of these hormones. But that fact that we return to this wild girl. So, you know, remember who you were before your period started. Probably a vegetarian fighting for animal rights, or, you know, whatever, some kind of, like, hopefully an empowered young girl, young female. That's who we return to, but as a fully resourced wise woman. So that's, you know, the role of the wise woman in this period of time between menarche and menopause. We do all the baby making, and if it's not babies, it's other than babies, you know, careers, new versions of ourselves, projects, businesses. During the summer or mother season of our lives between menarche and menopause, we are under the influence of the hormone of accommodation and self-sacrifice, which is what estrogen is. So we put ourselves second, and we devote our lives to our work, our babies, our families. And it feels good, we are richly rewarded for that. But then come menopause, perimenopause, it's kind of like the veil of estrogen. Come perimenopause, this veil begins to come up, and it's like, oh my God, I am not looking after everybody else anymore. And there is this reorientation, possibly for the first time in a woman's life, to herself, So that can be shocking and disturbing, and not just for her. Like, what's wrong with you? You were fine yesterday. Well, I'm not fine today. You're crazy. Oh my God, maybe I'm crazy. Like not many women understand what's actually going on. They just know they feel terrible. And I'm not promoting feel terrible. I'm promoting use the experience for what it's intended to do. So the way that I would encourage women to be around menopause is the same way with birth. If you need medical help, then great, get medical help. But not everybody needs to have their menopause controlled by holding it back, in the same way that not everybody needs to experience an induction of labor and epidurals and speeding up labors and all of that. There is a range of women that we can absolutely expect will have a normal birth, right? That's well known. And it will be the same for menopause, but that's not what everybody's hearing. They're hearing that it's too much and that you can't keep being the woman you were. You can't keep carrying on business as usual. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because it's different post-menopause. It's not business as usual. We are a whole new woman with a similar hormone cocktail to pre-puberty and with a relatively higher testosterone in comparison to our estrogen and progesterone, which makes us much more vocal and out there, and in a testosterone way. Our masculine qualities are much more predominant post-menopause. And that's going to be different to how mum or grandma or my wife or my partner was 5 years ago. She's not caring about me in the same way. It's like, because the hormone of accommodation and self-sacrifice is gone. Now, evolutionary biologists looked at human women some time ago and thought, why do human women live beyond their fertility? What's the use of them? And there's all these hypotheses of the grandmother hypothesis, etc. But basically what they discovered, as they do, they look to nature to see who else goes through menopause and what's the point of them. And what they found is that there are 5 creatures in the natural world. So not in captivity, right? That's like a whole other story. 5 creatures on the planet that go through menopause and live on. And that's human women, pilot whales, orcas, beluga whales, and narwhals. So these 4 toothed whales and human women. So they go digging to figure out why these toothed whales live beyond their fertility. And lo and behold, they find that post-menopausal, post-reproductive grandmother toothed whales become the leaders of the pod.
Wow.
So that's the blueprint for a mammal going through menopause, is to step into her leadership role and to share of her harvest. But, most women land splat into menopause, and thinking about the harvest of their lives is like beyond them. So we need to help everybody realize what's going on, and that menopause is not a random event. It's the culmination of your life thus far. Everything that we can pretty much predict what's going to happen at menopause based on what's happened before, because one rite of passage leads to the next and sets us off on a trajectory. So based on your previous birth experiences, you can pretty much predict what's going to happen at menopause if you don't do anything about it. Because when we come to a rite of passage, we come to a fork in the road. And one way is the usual way, the same old way, the way it always happens for me or in my family or in my community or my culture. And that so often is the wounded way, but we don't even realize it. And the other fork is the healed way. But to even know there's a healed way, you have to realize you're on the wounded way, and then you need to do the inner work that bridges the two, that sets you off in the healed direction. which doesn't mean all of a sudden everything goes your way. It means you're starting to realize that you need to make conscious decisions around what you're going to do. And then you're off on a path of self-discovery and learning. So my advice to women who are experiencing menopausal symptoms, I even hate using the word symptom around menopause, because a symptom is something of a disease, and menopause, even though we're getting the impression it's a disease, is not a disease, in the same way that childbirth is not a disease, in the same way that menstrual cycle is not a disease, you know, but it's all been pathologized and weaponized against us. So my recommendation for women during menopause, perimenopause, when all the stuff's happening, the physical stuff is happening because we have estrogen receptors everywhere in our body. So everything's just adjusting to less estrogen, which basically means less accommodation. And then with that adjustment, that's the physical experience. Now, the mental and emotional and spiritual experience is to experience the physical thing and feel like, what does that bring up for me? How does that serve my transformation? Because that's what menopause is about, transformation. You change into the next version of yourself, never to return to this previous version. So the spiritual practice of menopause is the same as the spiritual practice of menstrual cycle, is the same as the spiritual practice for mothering and giving birth, is you have the physical experience that your life enables, you know, like depending on your health and your strength and your previous health issues and whatnot. But the main thing is how you be with it, you know? So we've got to be with what is, not reject it, be with it what is, and see what arises for us and be with that. You know, like as an example, it took me 8 years to realize with my hot flushes at menopause, it took me 8 years to realize that I was enduring them. I wouldn't even take off my jumper. I would just endure. And when I realized that, I'm like, holy shit, that unraveled my whole life. I've been enduring everything for so long, and then tracking back to when I figured out I had to endure, and then there was inner child work that I needed to do to heal my inner child so that I didn't, as a older woman, just sit there like a child enduring discomfort. So, you know, like so much inner growth and healing of past traumas can happen when we be with what is and what arises for us from the physical symptom. And the other pressure on us is to keep performing and be business as usual. I mean, it's not what happens. It's the same as childbirth. You know, some women have amazing births and feel like they could get up and do it again straight away or whatever, but most require, and that's rare, right? But most birth, you know, in traditional cultures, there's the 40 days of lying in before you even go and do anything, right? We sadly, badly, our culture gets women out of the childbirth experience and back to work or whatever, you know, like we need to remember that these are massive events in our life and we need to recover from them. So menopause there's a recovery process as well as we adjust to this new physical way of being with the different hormones, and that it's not business as usual. And I know I'm talking a lot, but I just want to add one other thing about a different perspective of menopause. There's three things. So there's a wonderful quote from First Nations American culture. At menarche, a girl meets her power. Through menstruation, she practices her power. And at menopause, she becomes her power.
Wow.
And traditional Chinese medicine call menopause the second spring. And here in Australia, I've had the honor and privilege to sit with one of the Indigenous law women, Lore and Law. And I was asking her about her culture and how they are with all the different things. And I said, what about menopause? And she said, her name is Min Maya. She said, I don't know any women, Koori or white, Koori is how they refer to themselves, who are ready for this transformation of menopause. Everybody's just trying to be a cougar. And she said, and it's not business as usual after menopause. It's a whole new role. And the new role, the role for the Mimi, that's what they call that next phase, the role for the Mimi is to weave the dreams for the grandchildren, which is like a responsibility that someone has to take. And so I have this dream, this vision. And because I'm an Aries moon and an Aries rising, and I call myself a warrior witch, I have a dream of an army of grandmothers who stand up and weave the dreams for the grandchildren. And, you know, what that means for me is do what we need to do to ensure that there will be a world for our grandchildren and that we can be responsible in what we hand over to them, rather than just continuing this patriarchal culture, which is basically fixated on youth and beauty and 24/7 availability and go, 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 grow, grow, grow. You know, nothing in nature continues to grow. This thing here that we're looking at, this wheel behind me here, is the wisdom of the cycles that I continuously teach in all different places and ways. This is what we need to reclaim, because when we understand the wisdom of the cycles, then all our rites of passage make sense, and menopause makes sense, and the role of the menopausal woman makes sense. Not to just still look like she's 25 or 35 and be available to everybody. It's the new role, and that's going to shake everything up and probably do that split thing.
Oh, Jane, you've just woven so much magic. Oh, amazing. It has been an absolute pleasure to listen to you. I feel like I'm sitting in front of my wise grandmother with the fire in front of me, and we're all sitting around the fire. So thank you so much. There is so much there. I can't wait to listen back to this because there's so much there to really digest. Before we depart, I would love to ask you, what would be your ideal conversation around female health? Like, if we could put ourselves in that point right now, what would be the world we would be living in? What would be your ideal? What would women be doing and feeling?
Yeah. Well, first we got to defrag our brains of the patriarchy, right? We got to dismantle our internalized patriarchy. And then the communication, the voices to listen to are the ones we trust. And mostly our inner voice and the voice of our body and the voice of the earth. You know, like to realize that we are all interconnected and that everything reflects everything. Then in my ideal scenario, women's wisdom would be honored. The menstrual cycle would be honored. Our inner wisdom would be honored. And we would all feel heard and held and whole, not broken, not a problem. A human being on a journey through life with the feminine wisdom, knowledge, and power and strength being honored for everybody's sake. And the earth, as I said. Listen to the earth.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jane. So today is the 20th of February. Jane is doing a tour. She's going through Europe. She's going to be in the UK. Jane, would you just like to share some of those dates? I know some of them are sold out, but if you would like kindly share, that'd be amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just going to look at my calendar here that I've got because I can't remember everything. That's another postmenopausal thing. You can't remember everything, and that's okay. Someone else will. So I'm going to be doing my 3 one-day workshops. So the first one is Moon Song, which is about the wisdom of the cycles and rites of passage and a healing for our menarche, our first period, and the spiritual practice of menstruation. It's basically female 101 that they forgot to tell us. It's what should be taught to us in school and what our parents and family should teach us. So that's Moon Song, and that gets followed by the shamanic dimensions of pregnancy, which is a workshop about birth and pregnancy, good for birth workers, and not just for just for having babies. It's for birthing other things. So we get to figure out about our own birth imprint, which is extremely powerful. And then the next day, the third of the three, is called Autumn Woman Harvest Queen, which is about understanding menopause in context and how to harness the transformational powers of menopause. So I'll be doing them in Dublin on April 7, 8, and 9, and then Edinburgh on April 14, 15, and 16. Then I'm going to Glastonbury and I'm doing an 8-day retreat, which is an immersion into shamanic womancraft. That's nearly sold out. That's going to be amazing. There's going to be another one in France as well the month later. And the women will make a drum, a frame drum, and we go deep into all the rites of passage and stuff. But
Amazing.
then workshops in Glastonbury on May 3, 4, and 5. And the Autumn Woman Harvest Queen, the menopause workshop there is sold out. So I'm going to do another one on the Monday, May 6th. So stay tuned for that. And then I go over to France and I'm doing the workshops in France on May 17, 18, and 19. And then another 8-day retreat there from the 23rd to the 30th. The 8-day retreat in Glastonbury is the 22nd to the 29th. And then after France, I'm going to Berlin, where I'll do the 3 one-day workshops on June 6, 7, and 8. Then to Verona in Italy on June 13, 14, and 15. And then finishing my, what I'm calling the Siren Call tour. So it's in Ibiza on a full moon and the summer solstice on June 20, 21, and 22. So
Beautiful.
23 workshops in 7 cities over 3 months.
Amazing. I'll put the link to your website all below this for anyone that wants to check out and book. The details will be underneath this. I'm going to get my beautiful butt to one of your workshops in Glastonbury, so hopefully I'll see all of y'all there. But again, Jane, thank you so much for sitting with me in your dressing gown. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I cannot wait to meet you in person really soon. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you.
you, Abby. And thank you for what you're doing. You're playing
Oh,
an incredibly important role in all of this reclamation. So thank you so much.
thank you.